Sorry, that was a little too much, was it? Morning, everyone. I call to order the December 2024 meeting of the Audit and Compliance Committee of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents. Thank you for joining us, those in person and on Zoom. Just a reminder, while today's meeting is not being live streamed, it will be recorded and uploaded to the board's YouTube channel and archived for further viewing. Also a reminder that we're in the West Committee room today, and the West Committee room has room-wide audio, so just be mindful of any side conversations as they will be picked up by the recording, and make sure you're projecting when you speak so that those could be picked up as well. Our two student representatives are joining us via Zoom, Natalia Useche from the Rochester campus and Madison Hillard from the Crookston campus, who are both on Zoom. Welcome. Before I proceed, couple items to note. Chair Farnsworth is joining us virtually, and Vice Chair Gully is unable to attend. Chief Auditor, I think they would say I'm pinch hitting. Is that the correct? I don't know too much about baseball, but I think that is the correct term. And Chair Mayon has asked me to serve as acting chair since I had been previous chair of the committee. Second, I will note that we're going to take item 2, the external quality assurance review first, and then return to the agenda for item 1, the external auditor report and 2024 annual financial statement. With that, we will move to item 1. I believe our reviewers joining us online. I'll pass it to the Chief Auditor to introduce the topic.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Kenyanya, members of the committee. So today we're going to be talking about the quality assessment or assurance review that was performed on the university's internal audit department. As I've mentioned to the committee before, this is really the most comprehensive and detailed review that the committee receives on the functioning of the internal audit department. It's done once every 5 years, and to put it bluntly, it's a big deal for us. So I appreciate the time in order to be able to talk to you all about it today. Before I turn it over to Vice President Sharon Kierick, who is the Vice President of Audit, Compliance, and Risk at Virginia Tech, who led our external validation team, I'm just going to provide a quick refresher on the QAR process for the committee, just so that we make sure we're all on the same page. She'll then take over and she'll talk through the results of the review, some particular areas of strength that they identified in their review, opportunities for continuous improvement, and these are broken up between both ones in which we're looking at internally in the internal audit department, as well as those for consideration by the board and for the university's administrators. Then talk conclusion, next steps, and questions. On the next steps and questions, a couple things I want to highlight there. First, I want to remind the committee that we have time set aside on the May agenda in order to talk through changes to the internal audit department's charter. In addition to that, we're going to be talking about potential changes to processes, procedures, various items that came out of this QAR report, et cetera. So don't think we need to get everything solidified right now. If there are changes that you want us to be considering, we will have that opportunity to come back and talk about it at that time. For the questions piece, I just want to highlight we were planning on saving a lot of time for questions at the end of this. I highly doubt we're going to need all of the time in order to do this. So for an overview of the QAR process. So the process begins with a self-assessment. That is completed by the Office of Internal Audit. We began this late in the summer. This is a tremendous amount of work that we go through using the Institute of Internal Audit standards, documentation, and tools that they provide us in order to be able to look through whether our processes are in alignment with those standards. As a reminder, the Institute of Internal Audit is the governing body or the oversight body for internal auditors not only nationwide but also globally, and they really set these standards for all of us in order to be able to that we try to confirm that we're following. So the self-assessment, we do reviews of our documentation, we do surveys of university officials, et cetera, and we take that work, we gather it up, and then we provide a report. That report is available in your docket on page 129. That is our self-assessment. So that is the portion of the review that we conducted. That report and all of our results are then shared with the external validation team, and from there they will do their own interviews, their own reviews of our work papers, our processes, et cetera, to confirm that they're in alignment with our self-assessment, as well as if they have any additional observations. Just so that you know, they interviewed 17 different university administrators, 3 different regents, including our chair today. And they did an extensive review of our documentation. This included an on-site visit to the Twin Cities campus in October. The overall objective of the QAR review is to confirm whether or not we're generally conforming with those IAA standards. And again, the assessment scale is listed here: generally conforms, partially conforms, does not conform. As I mentioned to the committee before, the auditors are not known for our hyperbole, and generally conforms truly is the top possible rating. So, and with that, I turn it over to Vice President Keurig, if she's available online.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Good morning.
Okay, perfect. I would say I wish I was there with you in person, but it's probably colder there than it is here in Virginia. So
Yeah, you do not.
thank you for inviting me to join you all remotely. And Quinn, thanks for the good overview here of this process that we've been going through over the past several months. I know we released our report some time ago, and I hope you've had the opportunity to review it. And as Quinn said, I'm happy to go through this process and answer whatever questions I can, but we certainly don't need to fill up your time unless it is adding value to you and your process. So with that, I think I'm seeing a screen that y'all have projected there up in the room where we're looking at the validation results. And as Quinn said, we often get the feedback that auditors aren't very flowery in how we talk and give out positive feedback. However, this generally conforms rating is the highest rating of our profession, and I think the University of Minnesota has a lot to be proud of in its internal audit team. I hope that comes across in the report that you read, as well as in this little word cloud that we put together. These are some of the most common words that we heard across those numerous interviews that we did with leadership at the Minnesota system that Quinn mentioned. And so certainly the larger the word, the more often we heard it, and hopefully that gives you a good feel for Quinn and his leadership over your internal audit function and the team that he has the pleasure to lead and guide. If we can go to the next slide, I'll go into some of the specific notable strengths that we commented on within the audit report itself. And that is also represented in some of those positive words that you just saw on the previous page. Certainly, your auditors want to add value to the organization and be seen as partners to leadership. And that theme came across loud and clear as we were talking with the members of management at Minnesota. I think really the collaborative approach that the audit function takes to making sure that they're understanding what's most important to management in the work that they do, it really allows them to add value and lean in on areas that are important to the institutional strategy. The independence and objectivity that the internal audit function has at Minnesota is extremely strong. I know we've talked a little bit about the reporting lines, and we'll talk more about that later, but certainly the board's desire to show its support of the audit function and have its both functional and administrative reporting lines at the board level has sent the message loud and clear that leadership fully understands where the internal audit function is aligned and where it reports, and that it is there to help the institution, but also is responsible for reporting into the board. The highly respected leadership comment is one I think that you all should really take some pride in. Your auditors often have to go in and ask questions and explore things that at times maybe aren't working exactly as leaders want them to work. But the fact that they approach it with a deep expertise and understanding of your organization, that they bring in their knowledge to the table, but yet they're willing to give forthright input, and the fact that then they're respected for it by leadership and encouraged and asked in and invited in to help out in situations, I think says a lot to their strategy and approach of how they carry out the important work that you've charged them with doing. I can't, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm sorry, I realize I'm not controlling the slides here. Really, this isn't just the audit leader, but it's the skilled audit team underneath Quinn. I've been in higher education auditing for over 20 years, and the Minnesota shop has a long-standing high level of respect throughout our professional associations. And having the opportunity to come to your campus and meet with your team and see firsthand how professional they are, how they're dedicated to the work that they do, and they truly care about Minnesota and want to add value and help is just a very positive takeaway that I think you all should take a lot of pride in. And I think that that high functioning team that's respected, the fact that they have the trust and respect of your leadership, I think says a lot with how they go about approaching their work. You know, you all probably know that their audit plan development process is very robust and inclusive. The number of people that Quinn and his team talk to is vast. They want to understand what's on the minds of leaders in the organization. And as they go about developing that audit plan. And so that's a very positive feedback for you as well. And then the fact that they're flexible, you know, if you need to change the plan, if something comes up midstream, that they have the ability and are willing to modify as they need to ensure that they're adding value in the best way that they can. And you know, this last point I think is a little bit of a unique one. I've done quite a few of these QARs with my peers across the industry, the profession. And, you know, Quinn finds himself in a unique role of having served in this office for a period of time. And then when his predecessor retired, he had the pleasure to be appointed as your chief auditor. And sometimes stepping into a role after you've worked underneath an individual isn't always the easiest thing. And I think the entire QAR team was so impressed with that seamless transition, with the fact that not only you all have had a strong audit function for a long period of time, but Quinn's come in with his own ideas and thoughts for how to continuously improve its operations. And he's empowered his team to raise their voice and share ideas for how they can all continuously get better. And I think that empowering of his team and his willingness to take a look at how they do things to continuously grow is again a unique skill set, and one that I think Minnesota is very lucky to have. So that's really the summary of page 4 in the report that comments is on the progress and achievements of the internal audit function. I don't know if you want me to pause there and open it up for any comments or questions or discussion, or if you want me to keep going to talk about some of the opportunities to embrace that continuous improvement culture.
Perhaps keep going. I think the questions might be about the opportunities.
If you can continue.
Okay, great. So, you know, I will, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Quinn.
No, just continue.
I'm sorry. Okay, I thought I heard. Okay. So we have a couple of ideas for opportunities that are in the report. And again, when we had such positive overall comments and feedback, I want the committee to rest assured that these are not current deficiencies that we see or significant areas of concerns, but we really are trying to support Quinn and his team and to understand how they can continue to grow and evolve in what they do there for Minnesota. And so this first item on communications and outreach is just really important to auditors and what we do. We need to make sure that people understand how we can help. And we need to make sure that we're engaged with leadership as they are going through their day-to-day jobs and what they are required to do for the system. And I know that there's been some shifts and changes in recent leadership. And while I think that historically has been extremely strong for Minnesota, you know, with new personalities and new individuals, building relationships takes a lot of work and intentionality. And so we really are just wanting to share both with the board and leadership at Minnesota that we really need to keep our eye on this and make sure that Quinn has the time and the capacity and the invitations in to different venues to make sure that he really can understand what the strategy is for the institution and how he can come alongside management and help as best he can. We also heard a little bit from the clients, the audit clients that are receiving services from the audit function, and their interest to understand a little bit more about the process, the audit process, and where we're at in it, and maybe following up on outstanding items, and just making sure that there's some routine engagement. That also could provide an opportunity for Quinn's audit team to have kind of point people that they're interacting with periodically and keeping them apprised of what's happening within their areas of responsibility. We've referred to that as an audit liaison program, but you certainly can title that however you wish. But that's what the first item is really all about, just wanting to make sure that with the leadership transition, one to Quinn, but then two across the cabinet, the changes that have happened, that we really stay intentional with ensuring we have that connectivity and understanding from the audit team. The second item is reporting of audit results. And I will say some of these items we got from Quinn and his team. They, as I commented earlier, they have been evaluating how they do things and wanting to take a look at how they can continue to grow and evolve. And so, they themselves recommended kind of recalibrating their reporting practices. And I think that would be a good thing. The reports had a similar look for quite some period of time. Auditors, do a lot of work to reach the conclusions that they reach and to make the recommendations that they make. But sometimes all that detail may not be necessary to be in a official report that you end up making public, and you want people to read it, right? And you want them to understand it. And so perhaps being a little less prescriptive on some of the details, but focusing in on what are the key risks that we need to mitigate, and then partnering with management and helping management get to the point of themselves identifying the appropriate solution, I think would be a continuous growth and improvement area for Minnesota. And some members of management are better at this than others. Some want to be able to take the leadership to come up with the solution, and sometimes some individuals need help. But so we've heard different sides of this and talking with different individuals that I've talked with at Minnesota. But I think that there is some opportunity in his team to reflect on how they're engaging with leadership as they go through the reporting process. I just had a little thing pop up telling me my internet connection is unstable. Can y'all hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. The video is locking up a little bit, but that's okay. We hear you fine, so.
Okay, would you like me to just turn my video off to make sure the audio comes through?
I think you're fine. The audio's still coming through.
Either way works.
Okay. Okay, if I start breaking up on audio, please let me know.
Will do.
And then the other item on the reporting of audit results is really just some encouragement for Quinn to have some conversation with the board leadership and to make sure that his reports are delivering what you all want and need. I understand that, the timing of when you get these reports as well as the detail could be something that would, I know Quinn wants to make sure he's delivering what you want in that space. And so just encouraging whatever changes they consider going through, that they have that conversation at the board level as well. Okay, next slide. On the performance management comment, we've had some changes be released, as I'm sure you've heard, to our professional standards. And the new standards go into effect in January of 2025. We were evaluating Quinn's organization on the existing standards that have been in place since 2017. But looking at the new standards, Quinn's team has done an excellent job, a very detailed job of going through the new standards and assessing their organization to determine where there might be some areas of opportunity for them to focus on. And in this, some areas, some audit functions are already doing some of these things, but certainly I think in the new standards, there's some support for formalizing some of what Quinn's team has been doing and has already had on their roadmap that they want to do. And that is in the strategic plan area. I know that Quinn's been developing different pieces of goals and a plan and sharing it with you in different ways, but perhaps thinking about how he can package that in a way to put it forward to make sure that y'all understand his vision and his strategic objectives and what initiatives the internal audit function will be undertaking to ensure they can achieve those objectives would be good. Office goals and metrics could be expanded, making sure that they're measurable and relevant and aligned with the strategic objectives of the institution. Just making sure that we're being good stewards of the resources that we're entrusted and that we're being as efficient as possible in the work that we're doing. And so these goals and metrics can kind of help measure and track and give feedback on how we're performing overall. Employee development plans and goals is certainly something that they've had routine conversations with their team about, but we've encouraged them to think through maybe some more formalized, individualized development plans and goals for each team member, in addition to the overall broader goals for the office. And again, I think this was already on Quinn's roadmap and identified as something that his team was interested in exploring. But taking care of our team in a way to give them individualized feedback will continue the pipeline of very talented internal audit team that you have. And so that's certainly something that I think we have to stay focused on as well, to keep them engaged and motivated, as well as ensuring that you have the ability to take care of the evolving needs of the organization. So that's the comments on performance management that I think will align Quinn's activities very well with the new standards. Use of technology. We all are subject to needing to evaluate our technology from time to time. Technology changes so rapidly, as I'm sure you all deal with in your own lives. And so I know this was already on Quinn's radar to evaluate the work paper system that he has, to have continued focus on data analytics and to trying to determine the best strategy for his team to accomplish that. The follow-up process, this is how do we follow up on past recommendations that the audit team has made, and where does management currently stand on implementing corrective actions? Is just a little bit of a manual, I guess I'd say a little clunky process. They've got their own database and processes to keep it up, but there is some technology solutions that could really help automatically kind of flag, trigger, remind, and even collect updates from management should it wish to be deployed in that way. And so trying to ensure, again, that Quinn's team can get the information that they need to share with the board and leadership, but do it as an efficient a way as possible. And so that's the comment on technology. And then updated IAA professional standards. I guess I already mentioned this a little bit. I know Quinn's team did that robust analysis, and at some point in the new year, when he has had the time to go through his charter and what changes or processes that he might need to consider, I'm sure he will bring back his thoughts to the board on that. But just wanted to make you aware that there are some additional expectations in our professional standards, as it relates to how the audit function is interacting with the board. And so I think getting a good overview of that could be helpful for you all. So that concludes the recommendations directed towards the internal audit function. As we go through these reviews, we also we're talking to a lot of members of management, several members of the board, and getting feedback. And sometimes it makes sense for us to provide thoughts for your consideration to the board and to the president, the executives of the institution. And that's what these last two items are related to. The first one is focused on organizational independence. As I commented earlier, I think Quinn's alignment at Minnesota is very well understood, that he is an independent. We'll call that the third line of defense, or the third line. You have management in your first line. You have your oversight activities such as compliance and risk, legal in that second line, and then you have audit in the third line. It's as independent as you can be and still be part of an organization. The way that our professional standards encourage us to obtain this auditor independence, which is required for an effective audit function, is really in how it interacts and engages with the board. And that functional reporting is how we describe it. And there are some specific items bulleted out in the footnote in the report that tells you exactly what our standards say with regards to which activities should occur with the board's active engagement. And that includes things like approving the charter, which you do, approving the risk-based internal audit plan. I know you receive it. I don't believe you currently take a vote to approve it. So that's something that we've recommended here for you to consider. Approving the internal audit budget and resource plan. Again, I know you get some information on it, just making sure that you're being intentional in your understanding of the level of resources that have been dedicated to your internal audit function, and that your comfort with that level of resource and the level of support and services that you're getting out of it. The routine communication between the chief audit executive and the board, and we know that that is happening. That was commented on up front with that a positive statement of how y'all are doing things. Of course, any decisions to appoint or remove the chief auditor, approving the compensation, and then just making sure that Quinn has what he needs to do his job, that management isn't interfering, and that he can review the things that he needs to focus on. And so that's our standards, and that's what they call out. With regards to the reporting line, the chief audit executive must report to a level within the organization that allows them to fulfill their responsibilities, and needs to confirm periodically to the board that that's going okay. And so this is what we call our administrative reporting line. And currently, within the last couple of years, I know that has shifted from the president to the board. And I just wanted to call to your attention, ideally in our professional standards, it's recommended for the internal auditor to report to the chief executive of the organization administratively. Now, administratively is not the things we just talked about of directing the work, of influencing the work, of having oversight of the adequacy of the work. But it does send a very clear signal to other leaders of the institution as to the standing and the positioning of the internal audit function. And so, if helpful, I would like to share a little bit about my reporting experience and my professional time at Virginia Tech, just for your awareness as you are considering what might be best for Minnesota. And you may decide your current structure is really the best structure because it has no ambiguity. But I just want to make sure we talk a little bit about what some of the potential unintended consequences of that might be. I've been at Virginia Tech now 16 and a half years. And when I first started at VT, I was reporting into the VP for finance. And my first QAR, I had a few other vice presidents talk to the independent reviewer. I had no idea that they were going to share the concerns that they shared. But the head of IT and the head of administration shared that, you know what, I don't feel comfortable calling Sharon when I have a problem because I know she reports into the CFO and the CFO controls my budget. And I just don't know what it is Sharon might be feeling the need to share with the CFO. And so when my president heard that, he changed the reporting line back in 2011, and I've reported directly into the president since that time. I think it just, I wasn't even aware, right, of from where I was sitting and in my first couple of years here that there was that concern. But just knowing that each leader has their kind of own domain and their area that they have to focus on, and it sometimes has competing priorities with other leaders, right? Whether you're talking the academic enterprise or the administrative enterprise. And so I think just positioning your audit function at the highest level that you can sends a signal to all the leaders of one, the support that the audit function has, but also the ability to be a resource across the enterprise, whether it's administrative, whether it's academic. You know, things like athletics and research and advancement in my world are kind of outside of even the academic and administrative lines. And so just knowing that we have the need to go anywhere at the institution that is needed to do the work for the organization. And so, you know, if the board is inclined, I think that they should have that conversation with the president to see what your president is thinking, making sure that you're fulfilling both the board's needs and the administrative leadership's need. But I would caution if you, you know, think to change the administrative reporting line to be to someone other than the president, that you're going to open yourselves up potentially to some other risks and misunderstandings from other leaders. And it's just the perception issue. It's not that it's an actuality, because functionally the audit function will report to the board. But sometimes, you know, human nature, we have those perceptions and misunderstandings. And so you may decide that, you know, the reporting relationship of being both administrative and functional at the board level is most appropriate in Minnesota. It just is not a normal reporting structure that I've seen in higher education in my experience of, you know, working with other institutions and doing lots of benchmarking myself over my tenure. So we just wanted to call that to your attention, share with you a bit of the background on the professional standards of what we are called, how we're called to be positioned to be most successful and effective in carrying out the work, and just give you that information for your consideration. Do you want me to go ahead and talk about the next one, or do we want to have discussion on that item?
Yeah, we do want to move to discussion just so we make sure our next presenters get a chance. But I do think the next item might actually be where the questions come in. Regent Davenport, did I see you? I saw you writing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have just a question on this last, but I can wait, and then I have just a global question.
I think you can go ahead.
So, thank you. And first of all, thanks for your team and all that you've done on the QAR coming here, and that's a lot of work. The last comments you made about reporting structure, I'll say first, I'm favorable to the auditor reporting to the board, in that I see that being the overarching, for lack of a better term, power structure, where the whether the functionality or the word of supporting the auditor and reinforcing the auditor's role is really, really important to me. I understand the option of reporting to the CEO, and maybe it's a factor of Minnesota in kind of channeling some previous audit committee members' view that the administrator, the CEO, is subject to audit him or herself too. So if the auditor is reporting to someone to whom they may audit, that could be a conflict. So I'm just, I guess what I'm weighing in on our committee is my preference for reporting to the board, but understanding the other piece that you say in administrative role. And I think it is worth taking a look at some point down the future to see as we evolve where it is most appropriate.
Thank you, Regent Davenport. Vice President Keurig, can you briefly delineate functional reporting and administrative reporting?
Yes. So functional reporting is the most important aspect of where an internal audit function is aligned, and that must be to the board. And that we're not recommending that you change that. That is most ideal. That has responsibility for the programmatic work of an internal audit function. You are guiding them through their charter, through approving their audit plan, through ensuring they have adequate resources to do the work you want them to do. You receive their reports, the results of their work, and so the context and the meat of what we're talking about from an internal audit function should always be reporting to the board, to use your word, Regent Davenport, to have that power and that understanding that they have the ability to go into anywhere to do the work that they need to do. The administrative reporting line, while it may seem more minor in your eye, the reason I think sitting it with the president can be valuable is it shows to the rest of the leadership team that the auditor is a valuable member of the president's structure. However, what does that mean? Hopefully it means inclusion in conversations and meetings so that your auditor can stay engaged in what is most important to leadership and the strategy of the institution. If that's not happening, that's why we have that first recommendation for Quinn to focus on communication, that he needs to be a lot more intentional of having very routine touch points with different members of management. And he's likely going to need to do that in a lot of one-on-one settings to get the information that he needs in a timely way. But administrative reporting is just that. It's someone that's going to, take care of the administrative aspects because somebody has to be providing the checks and balances over the administrative activities of the audit function, such as approving Quinn's travel voucher and making sure that just basic things are occurring throughout the administrative enterprise, that his budget's getting loaded. If he has questions or whatnot, he has a contact that he can work with to work out issues.
Regent Davenport?
Thank you, and I agree with everything you said. And so, is there a question? I'm not sure what the current status is of your sitting on the president's cabinet or not. And that's, I think, part of what I'm hearing you say, and having been on a president's cabinet and experienced an auditor's role on that cabinet, you hear things in there that you won't pick up other places, which an auditor does have importance to contributing information.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair Kenyanya, Regent Davenport. Just to clarify for the committee, I am currently not on the president's cabinet. In the board policy, and in the internal audit charter, we said that the chief auditor may, at invitation of the president, but the president has elected to construct that cabinet in a way where I'm currently not on that cabinet. Just for your information.
Regent Davenport, that's a recent change that this committee made a year ago, recently.
The may?
Adding the may.
I
think it was
remember
can.
that, well,
It
that's
was-
why I was thinking,
Yeah, I think it was can. Vice President Carrick, thank you for and I guess Regent Davenport, the reason I kind of teed it up that way, when we made this change, I was on the committee and I was supportive of it. In having conversations with the QAR team, I think what I came to understand is what you don't want is your internal audit function to start to be seen as almost external. And that's not fair to CLA either, I mean, we have external auditors, so, and by administration, I mean administration broadly, but yeah, I appreciate those questions. Regent Johnson, Tayurabi? Regent Tayurabi.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I think that question of just where the auditor sits is worth visiting again, because I do feel like there's value to having the auditor be a part of the cabinet, right? And then I understand that the auditor needs to and has a right to audit, obviously, the president's as well, but it just feels like I'm not sure that it functions well if the auditor is not a part of the administrative cabinet. So because I think you don't want the auditor to be just raising the risk after the audit's done. And I think that So it's good time to just revisit it. I know why, logically, it made sense, but in practice, I think we maybe just have to think about whether that works well or not, yeah.
Thank you. Regent Farnsworth, and I know we're a little behind, but important conversation, so we'll try to get through it real quick. Regent Farnsworth, Chair Farnsworth.
Thank you, Chair. No. Thank you, Chair Kenyanya. You've earned that title today. I just want to weigh in on this conversation really quick and say thank you for this presentation. As chair of this committee, I was part of the process of being interviewed and have been engaged in this conversation through that process and normal agenda prep and all of that. So this has been something I've been thinking about. Trying not to repeat what others have said. You know, I stand behind why we made that change in our charter around May and the cabinet participation, and I've been learning more and thinking about this. I guess I would be interested as we move forward with the conversation, what the president's perspective is on this. We've been in a lot of conversations about it, but have never had a conversation with the president about it. And I know the president doesn't usually participate in this committee as a senior leader, liaison, or participant. So I just flag that as we move forward in terms of what that ends up looking like, but appreciate the clarification between the two different types of reporting. I'm someone who kind of would, by nature, in this topic and other topics, kind of land where Regent Davenport originally said around independence of the auditor, and that's, I think, part of the reason I was part of making that change originally. So I don't know, it's a lot of things to think about here, but hear that it's, see and recognize that it was a significant recommendation and part of this QAR, and so I think it's worth moving forward and discussing with more insight from the president directly. I think would be really helpful.
Thank you, Chair Farnsworth. I think there's some consensus that this be put just somewhere on the committee's radar for further discussion. Vice President Keurig, I'll take this opportunity to highlight the last point that you never got to, but we had a chance to talk about this during the interview, and that's the coordination among units. Your title is Vice President for Audit, Risk, and Compliance. As you know, those are three different positions and units here at the university. And I think part of our conversation was, because audit is, well, it's audit. Because audit is audit, how do we help the committee be more useful, productive, offer more value, right? And I think our conversation went to risk, compliance a little bit more. And as you know, our risk program is new and still being stood up, and we're really happy about that. Can you talk a bit about how those can interact? I know they interact differently at your university than they do at Rutgers, where the other reviewer was from. But you can talk about that just briefly.
Yeah, no, we've done a lot of benchmarking of how things are stood up, and they are stood up across the gamut. You can have three separate independent offices from one another. I believe my colleague at Rutgers is a chief compliance officer that has the risk program reporting to her, as well as an auditor reporting to her at Rutgers. But, I think the key is in thinking through, and the reason why this comment's in your report is you mentioned it. Your risk program is fairly new. And you're trying to get it stood up, and how do you make sure it's focusing on strategic risk to really inform the board of the right level of risk that you need to hear about. You're having a transition in your compliance leader currently, and so these areas are able to interact and should interact and coordinate, whether they're co-located in an office or whether they are reporting differently. And as noted in the report, Quinn has been very proactive in coming alongside of the risk program, the compliance program, and your legal counsel of having conversations and trying to make sure that they are leveraging information as best they can. We just wanted to call to your attention that there are other models out there and it's a good time for Minnesota perhaps to consider what is the right model for Minnesota. So for instance, in my office, when I started up ERM and compliance back in 2017-18, I wore one title, and that was the head of all three. And so I know I have a very long title, so I apologize. The last part of the title that you didn't read was Chief Risk Officer. And so we have separately appointed a Chief Audit Executive that reports to me administratively and reports to the board functionally. So I have a functional reporting line to the board as being the Chief Risk Officer and Chief Compliance Officer. And I separately have my Chief Auditor also have a direct functional reporting line to the board to grant that independence to the audit function. And so my Chief Auditor will meet separately with the board without being in the room when he needs to, and at a minimum at least annually, to make sure that that relationship stays strong. But the reason why these groups are interrelated is all of these programs need to understand the risks of the organization. So whether you're talking ERM level risk, whether you're talking compliance level risk, or whether you're talking risks that span both of those areas and even more broadly for what internal audit covers. And so as you have three separate programs trying to talk to leadership about risk, as I've done some of these QARs at places that have separate offices, people can at times get confused as to what the different roles are of the different offices and be having duplicative conversations. And so it all goes back to coordination. It can be coordinated even if offices are separate, but that being mindful of coordinating and ensuring that these different groups that provide assurance overall to the institution and support in risk compliance, and then audit is your assurance function to tell you that things are working as you intend them to work, that there's opportunity there for collaboration and perhaps for you to consider a broader organizational structure.
Thank you very much. And I mean, I think additionally to your point, the offices will be structured how they're structured, right? But do we understand if you gave me a matching game between those three and I had to, I don't know how good I would do, Regent Davenport, of knowing who does what, but then also what the committee's role in identifying risks or being aware of what the top, whatever are, during our review, and I can't remember if it was your institution or another, but one of you shared that risks are attached to risk level, and if it's a lower level risk, then say the dean could accept it. If it was a medium level, then it had to go to the provost or whatever vice president, and if it was an enterprise level risk, it had to come to the enterprise level. That's, again, our ERM is new, and that's kind of where we want to evolve, but I would certainly hope that this committee would make those conversations much more part of the agenda. Chief Auditor.
Yeah, very
yes,
briefly,
last comment. Yep.
Chair Kenya, I just want to point out, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that that's one of the reasons why the Audit and Compliance Committee has oversight of all three of those functions because of their interrelated nature. And I think it's important for us to make sure that we are distinguishing what those roles are. Again, going back to Vice President Carrick's earlier comment on really being, thinking about risk and compliance as more of a line 2 function, and then audit as a line 3. But then to your point, what is the distinction between what is compliance and what is risk is important. And just as it is the last comment, I do want to just pull up this slide to just call out the fantastic team that we really had here that completed this external review. This really is an all-star cast of higher education audit professionals led by Vice President Carrick, who's highly, highly respected in this space. So I just want to thank Sharon, and I want to thank again the whole team publicly, as this is a tremendous amount of work that they are not paid for. So this is them doing this just to provide their own independent assessment on behalf of our university. So thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Vice President Carrick. And while you're remote today, you did come here when the weather was nicer. And I appreciated meeting you with you then. So thank you for your time, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, apologies for going over, but that was a really important discussion. I think the committee found it helpful. I think with that, we'll move to what was item 1, the external auditor report. Chief Auditor, did you want to introduce that? See, we have CLA and our controller here.
Yes, sir. I think Controller Viola is
Oh,
going
yeah,
to be
okay.
introducing.
Okay. Not to be confused with the College of Liberal Arts.
Yeah.
Whenever you're settled, Controller Viola.
Good morning. morning, Chair Kenyanya, members of the committee. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our external audit team from Clifton Larson Allen. Over the last several months, we've been working closely with them to complete some of the engagements that they've been hired to do for the university. This morning, they're going to provide an update on the results of some of the work that has been completed so far, as well as provide an update on some of the work that's yet to come. With that, with your permission, I'd like to turn over to Principal Bashang.
Please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair Kenyanya, excuse me. My name is Jean Bouchard, and I am a principal with CLA. I have my colleagues, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya. I'm Michael Anderson. I am the manager on the engagement. I'm with Clifton Larson Allen. And I also have Daniel here that will allow him to introduce himself.
Chair Kenyanya and committee members, my name is Darren Prasad, and I'm a principal at CLA also.
Chair Kenyanya and the members of the committee, it is our pleasure to report today the results of the fiscal year 2024 financial statement external audit. You know, you guys just had a wonderful conversation about the role of internal audit, and as many of you know, our role is quite different. And so today, we want to kick off today's conversation, reminding everybody about what the external audit process really is and the auditing standards that we follow. Next, I'm going to have my colleague Daniel dive into some of the unique items for the 24 audit. Mike will then go over the results of the results of the audit, and then we'll go over some required communications. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about reminding everybody about what the external audit process really is. Our job as your external auditors is to audit the financial statements that's published by the university and tell the reader of those financial statements, can they rely on the information that's being published? Are those numbers, are those financial statements disclosures free from material misstatement? Are they free from material fraud? Are they free from material error? And are they free from material noncompliance? And based upon those three buckets of risk, we build our audit process to determine what is the likelihood of those types of misstatements. And ultimately, our job is to issue an opinion over the financial statements, and in just a bit, Mike will go over the results of that opinion. Now, one thing we always like to remind governance and management about is please don't look at us as part of your internal control structure. I think we all understand that management is responsible for establishing that internal control structure to prevent and detect material misstatement, to prevent and detect material fraud, and to prevent and detect the material noncompliance. Now, what is our job when it comes to internal control? We do test certain key controls around the financial reporting structure, okay? So whether it's payroll controls or general disbursements or tuition controls, we do test, and ITGCs, IT general controls, we test those controls as well. But we don't issue an opinion over internal controls, right? Our opinion is over the financial statements. Our opinion is over those disclosures associated with those financial statements, right? So we don't issue an opinion over the internal control structure, and you shouldn't look at us as part of your internal control structure. That being said, we do have reporting responsibilities to you as it relates to if we were to identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, those matters are required to be reported to you. So with your permission, Chair, I'd like to turn it over to Daniel to talk a little bit about some of the unique items and the risk assessment that we do perform during the audit.
Please.
Chair Kenyanya and committee members, as a reminder, as auditors, it is as we go through an audit, we don't audit every single transaction that took place within the fiscal year. However, we do our audit using a risk-based approach. And what that means is that back in the spring, we met with governance, we met with members of the management to get an understanding in terms of what unusual risk was there in 2024. Was there any complex transactions? We have the higher education trends, we look at their financial statements, and we come up with what we consider to be risk areas within 2024. Based on auditing standards, there are some presumed significant risks, which are noted on the screen there: management override of controls and revenue recognition. However, based on our planning discussions with management and governance, we noted that valuation of alternative investments was considered to be a higher inherent risk. And then based on our audit plan response, we did do some, as Jean mentioned, we tested some controls over general disbursements, tuition, payroll, and then also performed some interviews with management just to get some additional items as we plan our audit and procedures. And I'm pleased to report that there were no instances of management override noted throughout our audit, no material weakness audit, no material audit adjustments, or other matters noted. So in terms of moving on to the next slide relating to some unique audit items, back when we had met in spring, we had discussed that there was a new audit and standard that we were required to implement for fiscal year ending 2024. The accounting side of me would say that the standard is SAS 143 to 145. But just to summarize what the requirements require us to do is that it makes us focus a bit more in terms of risk assessments as it relates to estimates. During our planning, knowing the higher education industry, looking at your financial statements, we had to gain a clearer understanding in terms of what your significant estimates are within your financial statements so that we can plan our audit accordingly. And then the other significant item as it relates to this new standard is that we had to dig deeper as it relates to your IT understanding. So what does that mean? Is that at the end of the day, the goal of the new standard was to make sure that we get a good understanding as it relates to your information technology to make sure that's reasonably secured so that when we look at the information that's coming from your system, that it is timely and accurate. And then as auditors, we do need to get some assurance so that we can plan accordingly to be able to rely on your information technology, that information that's coming from the university's financial reporting system is appropriate as we plan our audit. So what did this have on our audit impact? As you can tell, since the new standard, we did have to spend a lot more time this year on your information technology. We did engage our information technology specialist at CLA to make sure that we get that understanding that's required for the new standard. And there were more time spent this year on information technology compared to prior audits as it relates to this piece here. So with that, Chair Kenyanya, I'll turn it over to Mike to talk a bit in terms of our audit results.
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya and committee members. I'll start off by prefacing this slide by I'm going to spend 30 seconds covering the results of a process that really takes a year, right? We're here for 5-10 minutes saying here are the results in a short presentation, but really the results you have in front of you isn't the standard of the higher education industry. Not every institution can say we get these types of results, so it is a pleasure to be able to sit in front of you and present a clean audit. As was mentioned in the previous presentation, we as auditors aren't artists, we're not linguists, we don't create great grammar to communicate results. So when I say you have an unmodified opinion, that really is the highest level of assurance that we as external auditors can provide over those financial statements. Just remembering that we conduct our audit not with absolute assurance. We're not auditing every transaction, so they're materially accurate in relation to generally accepted accounting principles in the United States. In addition to that, Daniel kind of stole my thunder here on the results, but as he mentioned, we had no material audit adjustments, no material weaknesses, and no significant deficiencies. So just getting a little more background on that terminology, I've heard differing interpretations. Sometimes significant deficiency feels a lot more weighty than material weakness, but material weakness really is worse than significant deficiency. So just with that understanding, none were present, but there is a differing level of impact and importance in those findings.
So you are linguists.
Well, my brother teaches English, so. And as part of our audit, we do have required governance communications that it's set forth in a formal letter to this group, but we'll just cover those as part of our presentation. We had, in addition to our auditing standards, the university had a new accounting standard that went into effect this year. So GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, number 100. So we were in triple digits of new standards. What that really relates to is how the university and really any public institution accounts for accounting changes and errors, where there were a little bit of specific instances where one process or approach should be taken compared to another. This standard really makes a uniform guidance to say this is how you account for this transaction. And the general impact is most changes are done retrospectively. And that's important because this year, the university made the election to change how they report for fiduciary activities. So if you can recall, 3-4 years ago, there was a new standard that required fiduciary activity to be broken out from the university's financial statements. Now, within those standards, there is an option, based on certain criteria, to not break that activity out if the activity comes in and goes out within a 3-month span. So that option was always available to the university, but this year the university elected to bring those activities back into the university statements, just primarily as a cost-benefit analysis of how much time are we spending breaking this out, and is it really providing the value that we're looking for, and the decision was made.
Mr. Anderson, what's a fiduciary activity?
Yes, fiduciary activity is when the university holds on and controls assets for the benefit of a third party. So, think of some student aid, right? The university it's not their aid that they're necessarily giving to the student. They're receiving aid from a third party and just passing it along to the students. So that's the primary activity that's accounted for. Yep. So that is one of the changes that you'll notice as you're reading through the financial statements, is if you compare fiscal 23 to fiscal 24, that separate statement for fiduciary activity is no longer there. Difficulties related to the audit. The important thing here is the 3 no's. So we noted, or we had no difficulties as part of the audit, no disagreements, and no other findings that we're holding on to and not reporting here. As Daniel had mentioned, there are certain estimates in certain higher risk areas that we identify. Just as the nature of preparing a set of financial statements, there are estimates that have to be used to value certain things. So as part of our audit, we identified 2 primary higher subjectivity estimates. And the third, there's a leveling table for investments, so level 3, and investments valued at net asset value. Really, it's those private equity investments that have investments in tiers of investments that involve significant valuation estimates as part of valuing those for the financial statements. And the other is the other post-employment benefits liability, deferred inflow of resources, and deferred outflow of resources. And really that estimate comes from an actuarial valuation that, again, carries some inherent subjectivity just in terms of estimating what those balances will be. And then finally, just other items that we want to communicate here. We noted no material adjustments as part of the audit process, so management's balances remained management's balances throughout the process. We also had no past adjustments, which are areas that we may recommend an adjustment for, but based on materiality, management has the ability to say, we don't want to make that change. So no items were reported as that either. And included in our governance communication, the written governance communication, there is a management representation letter where management represented certain items as part of preparing and presenting those financial statements. So a lot of information there. As I had mentioned, a lot of time went into those 2 slides, so I do want to just pause for any questions at this time.
Committee members, any questions? Or Chair, I don't know if Chair Farnsworth's still online, because I think he had a chance to meet with the team. I think you can go ahead to this one.
Okay, so Chair Kenyanya, if I'll pass it along to Jean to continue and wrap up our presentation.
All right, thank you, Mike. And we just want to end today's presentation, first of all, thanking management. They have other jobs other than just responding to auditors' inquiries for, 6 to 8 months out of the year. So certainly want to thank you, especially in our first year. I feel like we've started a great step of partnering with the university. while it's very important that we remain independent and objective, we believe we can still create that professional partnership with the university. We've been doing this for a long time, but our largest office, we are a national firm. We have our largest office, though, we have over 165 of your great alumni as part of our firm, and we want to continue to provide thought leadership and other partnership opportunities. So we just want to thank management for their time and starting off what we believe is going to be a fantastic relationship. So with that, Chair Kenyanya and the rest of the committee, I'd love to hear any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you. Really appreciate the presentation and the work. And, obviously we're hearing good results about the audit, but I think we're also hearing about the partnership with the controller and administration and their willingness to partner and provide material. So that's great to hear as well. And especially, you're right, in a first year, right, where maybe there's some familiarity to be built up with the environment and whatnot. And this is certainly impressive. I will briefly ask about, is it 143, 145? I think what you said was the testing was to make sure you can trust the information you're getting out of the IT systems. And just to make sure I'm understanding that correctly, when you're taking samples, you're pulling reports and then using that for your work. But you're assuming those reports are correct, that when you run this report, these are the right numbers. So are you then taking a sample of that and doing manual confirmation of some systems to say, okay, what they're giving us is something we can use for the rest of the report? Am I understanding that correctly?
I can, Chair Kenyanya.
Yeah, Mr. Prasad.
So overall, in the past, using the past standard, what we had to do is just get an understanding of your information technology. So this year, with diving deep into your information technology controls, our IT team worked with management if there were certain key controls that are in place, we actually went the next extra step to walk through those key controls. If you said you had a disaster recovery plan, we went the extra step to make sure that we can see when your disaster recovery plan was updated. If you had a risk assessment done, we looked at the risk assessment to make sure that what you're telling us you have as controls, that we see it live in action that you did do it within the fiscal year, or there's a plan to make sure that it's implemented.
Regent Davenport, I should just ask the question instead of sharing my convoluted understanding of it. I should have just asked the question and let him answer it. But
You do that well and the rest of us benefit.
I'm putting myself out there very well. Thank you for that explanation. And those results were shared with administration as well. Okay, all right, perfect. Any other Regents controller, anything to add? Okay, well, really appreciate the time and a fantastic audit in the first year. And the, that last slide about the interns and the alums, and we'll be looking for these numbers to go up next year. But all in all, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. And next we will turn to the institutional compliance and conflict of interest reports for discussion. Interim Chief Compliance Officer John Gooden is on Zoom. Whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya, members of the committee. I'm here today to provide you with the FY24 report on our compliance risk reviews, U-report statistics, consolidated reports of misconduct, and also institutional conflict of interest. We're at page 155 of the docket materials. Getting into the compliance risk review process, this process is separate from what Chief Auditor Galswick's process is for conducting audits. When we do these compliance risk reviews, we have more than 30 topic areas. And so what we do as staff in the Office of Institutional Compliance is we, in a particular topic area, we look at the university policies and procedures for that area, confirm that the laws and the regulations applicable are contained in those policies and procedures. And we look at things such as training, monitoring, and just asking questions in that particular area to assess how well the policies and procedures and the implementation of those are being carried out. So in a typical year, we'll conduct about 4 or 5 compliance risk reviews, working with the policy owners of those areas, the subject matter experts in those areas, and work collaboratively with them because we want to make sure it's a beneficial process. It's not just us checking their homework. So this coming year, the fiscal year 25, we have 3 compliance risk reviews that are in progress. For environmental safety, that's the first one in that particular area with regard to environmental health and safety. The lobbying and political activities is the second time we've looked at this area. We previously did a compliance risk review in FY19. The food safety dining services and meat science lab, we're going to split those 2 apart because they fall under different leadership management. So that's undergoing a first-time review. And then we plan on looking at the donated human bodies. Internal audit has looked in this particular area within the last several years, so we're going to make sure that we work in conjunction with the findings of what Quinn's team came up with several years ago and explore from a compliance perspective that particular topic area. And then sexual misconduct, we previously conducted a compliance risk review in FY21, so this will be our second look at that. With regard to the risk reviews completed in FY24, there were 2 of them. The first one is controlled substances in clinical settings, and we looked at areas outside of the UMP Fairview arena and identified 4 areas where there's controlled substances that are dispensed, and identified that there is no university policy and procedure that addresses controlled substances. So things such as an auditing of those particular areas. We recommend looking at a way to do that on an annual basis. We recommend taking a look at the various policies and procedures that are employed in those 4 clinical settings and seeing if we can establish a system-wide policy and procedure, recognizing that there may be some unique ways in which those 4 offices handle things, but would like to have some kind of central policy and procedure that we can turn to apply those standards. And then looking at diversion, which is if you're prescribing these controlled substances, if they're used for purposes other than the reason why they're being prescribed, how do we handle those scenarios if they pop up? So that's right now being looked at by the Health, Safety, and Risk Management Office. They're looking at meeting with individuals from those various settings and trying to see what we can come up with as a central policy and procedure. The second completed compliance review was in the area of international students and the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, which is the Department of Homeland Security's web-based system for maintaining information on international students who are attending school here in the university system. There are designated school officials at each of our campuses. The principal designated school officials here in the Twin Cities campus, and based on this SEVIS, the Student Exchange Visitor Information System, the SEVIS has somebody as a field representative from DHS that checks about twice a year to make sure that that process is working smoothly. And what we're looking for is if we have students here on a visa to be able to matriculate at our campuses, are they enrolled full time? Are they working when they're not authorized to work within the country? Our review of this process was everything looks good. The one opportunity for improvement that we identified there is establishing some process between the campuses so that we're sharing information and making sure that the process throughout the system works as well as it can be. Moving into our U-Report system, which is we have a third-party vendor who operates our U-Report. That third-party vendor has a toll-free number and also our university's dedicated web page for filing a U-Report. It allows for anonymous reporting within the system. The anonymous reporter can get back into the system, and so we can continue to communicate with that individual without knowing who they are, which is critical to having an anonymous system of reporting. And about 70% of our U-Reports that are filed annually are done anonymously. About 10% of the U-Reports that come in are through the toll-free phone number. Our vendor converts those to U-Reports, so when they come into our office, where our compliance program coordinator looks at all of the U-Reports, she can then direct those U-Reports based on the substance of the report to the expert and to the office that can then check into the issues. And on page 157 of the audit materials, we show you the statistics for FY24. We had 335 total reports. Most of those were completed within the fiscal year, and about 6% or 18 of the reports were substantiated. And I want to make the point that U-Reports aren't always about misconduct. They do exist for reporting of perceived violations of law, policy, regulations, but we find that there are a number of reports that come in, and it may just be that it's a student-teacher relationship, it's a employee-supervisor relationship, and so it doesn't necessarily mean it's misconduct. It's an issue that has come up and needs to be looked into because we want to make sure we're doing the right thing in all these instances. And so the categories of the reports that came in, we show you on page 157. The majority of those fall into what would be categorized as discrimination, harassment, or sexual misconduct. A lot of that would be directed to the Equal Opportunity and Title IX office. Of course, a lot of employment, human resources issues, and we have a primary contact within the Office of Human Resources. We direct those to. I mean, ultimately, a lot of these reports would be getting directed back to a college, a unit, a department that would then check into it. So we have primary contacts in all of those topic areas that we can direct the U-Reports to. The reporters asked to try and categorize their report. About a quarter of the ones that come in are categorized as others. For purposes of pulling this report together, though, our compliance program coordinator will properly categorize those other reports into one of these areas. If you look at page 158 of the docket materials, we show you a comparison between FY23 and FY24. Not a marked difference between the years as far as the categories of the reports that come in, surprisingly. Several years ago, the Regents asked that we consolidate reports of misconduct, and that's because there are a variety of ways that a community member, or actually even somebody outside of the university community can file a report. They can go to, obviously, a supervisor, they can go to a central office. So, for example, if somebody has an HR issue that they're concerned with, they can go direct to the Office of Human Resources rather than filing a U report. So this consolidated report of misconduct, that's the intent behind that, is to pull the reports that go directly to central offices and combine that with what we have through the U report system. And again, in that area, 665 total go direct to equal opportunity in Title IX, which is the vast majority of those other central office reports. And we had a total of over 1,000 total reports filed with central offices. So on page 159 of the docket materials, you can see the consolidated numbers there with 61 substantiated reports, and the actions taken that highlight what I mentioned earlier, which is these aren't necessarily all misconduct matters. There could be just errors. And so they don't all result in disciplinary actions. There have been some terminations as a result of these reports, but the non-disciplinary actions could just be training, counseling, things of that nature. Moving now to the annual institutional conflict of interest report. This is one part of the conflict of interest program. We have an individual conflict management process that addresses most of the conflict of interest work that I'm involved with. On the institutional side, we have the financial disclosures for university officials, which is completed by our university officials and select other individuals. And we've had 100% compliance rate of filing every year I've been here since 2011. As part of our institutional conflict policy, we conduct annual reviews of areas in which an outside business entity is involved in two or more of these areas. If they're providing gifts through the foundation, if they're awarded contracts at the university, or sponsor research at the university, or have some connection through our technology commercialization through licenses. And my focus when I looked at the report that gets pulled together annually is areas in which a business entity may be providing gifts to the foundation and also has a contract that has not been competitively awarded. So I just checked to make sure that the basis for those contract awards has been properly categorized, and did not find any issues this year. Another area that under the institutional conflict policy we're required to bring to the Regents is matters involving subject matter where the external relationships have an unusually significant financial impact that represent a potential conflict, or serious policy issues or significant public impact on the reputation, mission of the university, or conflicts arising in that otherwise require the board's review, and we did not have any matters during FY24. With regard to the institutional conflict review panel, which is comprised of 3 faculty members to include the 2 co-chairs of our individual conflict review panel. Also, Chief Auditor Galswick is on that, and Associate VP Mike Volna. And we added 2 community members this year, Dr. Frank Sarah and Dr. Al Levine. We're very happy that they've joined our panel. And we held 5 meetings during FY24, primarily to look at clinical trials involving university licensed IP, which due to the license, we're always going to be entitled to potential royalties should that IP make it through the clinical trial process and get FDA approval. So we consider that a financial interest that requires an institutional conflict review. The license in some instances may also give the university some equity stake in the licensee or have milestone payments associated with the clinical trial. So we consider all the facts in those cases to include the financial interest that the university has and the stage at which the clinical trial is being conducted. The majority of the time, they're the first phase of the clinical trial process. And we always establish management plans with having unconflicted investigators engaged in conducting those trials and disclosures to participants in those trials of the university's financial interest as part of those plans. So that is my report. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gooden. I apologize for my bad time management. We're right up against time, but Regent Johnson does have a question, so if it's okay, that'll be our only question. Regent Johnson.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Okay. I was looking at what you're doing for 2025, your compliance risk reviews. And for example, on lobbying and political activities, what's your, without going through all the process, what's your end result usually when you look at these things?
Mr. Gooden.
Chair Kenyanya, Regent Johnson. The end result is we just want to make sure that what we have in policy and procedure and guidance that we're actually executing. And if we're, through our review, identifying some gaps, that we close those gaps. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Mr. Gooden, as you heard in the earlier conversation, I mean, the committee definitely wants to engage with, compliance more, so I'm sure we'll be seeing you more in the committee. Thank you for the report, and I have questions of my own. I think I'll funnel those on the side. I always have questions, guys. But with that, I mean, I will just point the committee to information items, Chief Auditor, unless there's something that you think needs to be
Hang on
on.
very briefly.
Yeah.
I can speak very
Please.
briefly. Thank you, Chair Kenyanya, members of the committee. Very briefly, these are engagements, the information are engagements with external audit firms that were under $100,000. One of these was Clifton Larson Allen, which was contracted for by the Controller's Office related to money received from the state of Minnesota. The other two, Baker Tilly, that was the review of the enterprise risk management, or was the assistance in establishing the enterprise risk management function, as we were talking about earlier, and then tax consultation with Ernst & Young. The only other reminder I will give to the committee is there's conversations happening per our previous committee meeting related to the board operations and agenda guidelines. So that might change what gets reported here, specifically removing that dollar threshold. So this might look differently in the future, and Controller Viola is looking at that and will likely update this information in the future.
Thank you, Chief Auditor. Thank you, committee members. Apologies for my tardiness. Let's head over to the horseshoe.